Hey folks, Tate here with Do All Outdoors. Today we're going to be assembling the Flyway 4x4 180X. So we're going to begin by assembling the cart. Pretty simple here. We just got 4 bolts per axle and then 1 large bolt to get the tow handle on the front of the cart. We're going to start by taking per each end 4 of these bolts with 14mm head, 13mm nut, 2 washers per bolt. We'll take it from the top of the cart, stick 1 washer on that bolt, slide the head through, then stick the other washer and the nut on the end. And I'm just going to start it by hand, and then I'll come back and tighten them all once I get them all on here. All right, and once again, I've got a 13mm socket for the nut and 14 for the head of the bolt. We'll just tighten them all down here. All right, now we'll move to the front axle. Same 4 bolts in the front as we used in the rear. Again, 2 washers and 1 nut per bolt. Make sure that the spring here, I'll show you, the spring for the tow bar is facing away from the cart. Otherwise, you're going to have a heck of a time getting that thing attached. And I'll do the same. I'll stick 1 washer on the head of the bolt, slide the bolt through the cart and the axle, and then a washer and a nut on the bottom. And we'll tighten those. All right, now we're going to attach the tow bar to the front of the axle here using this large pin. And what we're going to do is put the handle in place, slide that pin in through the handle, and put that washer and a large nut on the other side of it. Now this nut is 19mm. So I will swap out to that. And I'm going to use a channel locks on the other side just to hold on to the head of that pin. While I tighten that nut. So now I got the cart assembled. Before I put the wobbler on the cart, I'm just going to get the thrower's base put on the thrower. We'll move that to the side and begin with getting the wobbler on the cart. It's just easiest to have a platform to do this part than to do it upside down. Because what we've got here is I got 4 bolts with a 17mm head and a plastic washer. That plastic washer can get a little tough. That's why I like to do this upside down, because we've got to get the washer between the base and the thrower itself. So when we're doing this, we want to make sure we have this sliding range facing towards the rear or the power switch of the trap. What we're going to do is take the bolt, push it through the trap base, and then stick that plastic washer on it, then begin to thread it into the trap head. That's where it can be a little tricky. 2 people make this a lot easier than 1, but 1 can get it done. All right, so again, I'm going to slide that plastic washer in. It can be a little tricky. Then begin to thread it in. I don't want to thread these too far, so I've still got a little gap on the other side to do the same. Get that washer between the base and the trap head. Get it threaded, and we'll get that final one on there. All right, now is where you can kind of set the angle as you tighten up those 17mm bolts. I'll just pick somewhere in the middle for now. Okay, now we got that done. I'm just going to flip it over, get it off to the side, and then we'll put that on top of the wobbler when the time comes. Now we've got the flat wobbler plate. You're going to see we're going to be using this hole, and this hole. There's 3 holes on the cart that match up perfectly. And we're going to get these on there. So again, I've got these 3 bolts, the 14mm head and the 13mm nut. Keep 1 washer on the bolt. Stick the other on the thread end, followed by the nut to secure it. And again, now that I've got them all started by hand, then I'm going to tighten it with the tools. Okay, wobbler base is on the cart. Now we're going to get the wobbler on top of its base. Power switch facing the tow handle. These 4 holes on the outside of the wobbler are going to match up perfectly with that plate below it. And once again, 4 bolts, 14mm heads, 13mm nuts on them, 2 washers per bolt. Do it the same way. I always like to go from one corner to the opposite. It always seems to help align the other opposite corners if I do it that way versus starting both on one side. And try not to tighten any bolt until you have them all started. Otherwise that can throw out the alignment a little bit too. And tighten them. Okay, now I've just placed the thrower here on top of the wobbler. visually lined up the 4 holes with the bolts, and I'm going to do the same thing. 14 millimeter head bolt with a 13 millimeter nut, 2 washers per bolt. Get them all started by hand, and then I'll tighten them with the tools. Okay, moving up. Now I'm going to go ahead and put all of the stacker poles on top of the turret. What we've got is on the outer ring, you'll have male threads sticking up out. So on those, we're going to use the poles that have female threads on both ends. So those go on the outside here. And then internally, you've got female threads. So on the internal ring, we're going to use the poles that have a male thread on one end and a female thread on the other end, and work those all in by hand. All right, now that we got all the stacker poles on, what we're going to do is we're going to take the top of the turret assembly and each of these little 11 millimeter head bolts and get this bad boy on top. All right, now that we've got the turret fully assembled, we're going to go ahead and get the safety ring on and then the mainspring, and we will be done. So for this safety ring, we got the arms tucked in back here. And if yours are loose, you can take a Phillips head screwdriver, tighten those up, but mine's pretty snug, so I'm not going to worry about that. And then we're going to take the safety ring. You're going to want to loosen these up here, these nuts in the back, or these bolts in the back, which I believe are 14 millimeters, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, they are. Just loosen them up a little bit so you can get the safety ring down in there, and then we'll tighten them back up afterwards. I'm going to start back here and then move up to the front to get the ring in the arms. All right. There we go. All right, then I'm going to take the ring, get it in a spot just visually that I like. Arms are kind of pointed approximately 45-degree angles, and stick that ring in there. Coming out of the box, this ring might be a little stiff. Give it time and it will look a little more like this one does here. From there, what we're going to do is take our throwing arm, point it straight outward. What that's going to do is move that cam around a little bit so we can take the hook on the end of the mainspring. Here, I'll move the arm around so you can kind of see it again. This is what we're going to hook the mainspring onto right here. So again, I'll push that arm out to 12 o'clock, remove the hand crank, that nylon sleeve off of the spade bolt. Hook the spring on there. Slide the spade bolt through the rear of the trap. Put the nylon sleeve through. I don't know if you could see that, but the thinner portion actually slides into the frame of the trap. And then the hand crank. And there's no specific amount of turns on that hand crank. What I like to do is hold on to the spring itself so you can feel when you start to get tension on that spring. That's when I stop. You can adjust that in the field for speed and distance, but just until you get tension on that spring, that's a good spot to start. And from there, we've got the whole thing assembled. I'll move the cords off to the side here. The 4x4 180X and the 4x4 alone both come with the wheel chocks. So when you get her into position, just chock the front and rear wheels, keep it from going anywhere, and you're ready to throw.